his athleticism doesn't lend itself to what we see Aaron Donald do. But Quentin Williams is a game changer. And the ability to push the pocket from the interior is paramount now in the NFL. You have to because of guys we're talking about like right now.
Yeah.
If you draft these type of guys, we saw Patrick Mahomes, arm angles, moving outside of the pocket. When you have a guy that can force that guy and these edge rushers that you're paying $100 million to be able to get to those guys because they are running 4.4s. And that's the thing that we don't talk about either. In the NFL, there are 4 elite players up front on defensive lines. In college, you can run around a little bit and you can scramble. Sure. And I just keep having that conversation with myself. What I saw Kyler Murray do against Alabama after having a rough patch at the beginning of the game was very impressive. But also what I saw was Alabama lock in and say, we're not going to allow him to get outside the pocket, and he struggled a little bit with that.
All right, so that's where we think we're going to be at number 1. Let me bring Shefty back into the conversation, because Shefty, you tell us you don't expect to trade at number 1, but I think there's a lot of wheeling and dealing in store for us tonight. Where does the action begin as far as that's concerned in the draft tonight?
Look, I think the New York Jets, as you know, Greeny, have had a for sale sign on their pick for quite some time. I think they'd love to move out. I think there have been teams that have been calling to see if they can get up there. We'll see whether one is willing to offer enough. We know that the Detroit Lions at number 8, the Buffalo Bills at number 9, Jacksonville at number 7, they're all potentially in the market to move back. We've got a bunch of teams in the 20s and 30s. Baltimore Ravens with only 1 pick here in the first couple of rounds. They'd move back. The Los Angeles Rams at 31, they move back. The Patriots at 32, they move back. There's a common theme here. There are a lot more teams that are willing to move back in this draft than there are teams willing to move up. But the picks have not been made yet. The players haven't started falling off the board. The first quarterback hasn't been picked yet. And as soon as that happens, sometimes scenarios change. Again, I think there are more teams that want to go back, that want to come up. But I think the Jets starting at number 3 would be the first spot that you'd look at for a team wanting to move up to try to target.
I hear you, and that's what I think a lot of Jet fans, including myself, are rooting for. Super quickly, Shefty, who is it teams are going up for? If someone's going up to 3, who are they going up to get?
Listen, it would obviously, you would think, be Dwayne Haskins at this point in time. But maybe if the first 2 picks are Murray and Bosa, maybe there's a team that values Quentin Williams enough to go up to number 3 to try to get him. But Dwayne Haskins would be a guy, when you look at the previous draft screening, right, there have been 11 quarterbacks picked in the first round. 10 of the 11 came from teams that traded up to get them. The only one of the last 11 quarterbacks picked in the first round that wasn't a team that traded up to get him was Baker Mayfield. And Cleveland had the number 1 pick. Cleveland didn't have to trade up. The other 10 quarterbacks, teams were aggressive in going to get. Last year, there were a lot of moves up for quarterbacks. Next year's quarterback class is supposed to be a great quarterback class. You wonder if the talent this year warrants those moves up that teams will make. And we'll find out tonight as the draft begins here in Nashville.
All right, Shefty, stay with us again. Let me bring it back out here for some conversation. If you watch this show, you know where I stand. I believe Dwayne Haskins is the best quarterback in this draft. Does anyone at this table agree with me? I think you do, right?
I totally agree with you.
Why is Dwayne Haskins the better prospect to you than Kyler Murray?
Number 1, poise. Number 2, prototypical. And number 3, Ohio State would have lost 5 games without Dwayne Haskins at quarterback. And when you see the guy carry himself, there was a lot of things going on. Let's talk about from a leadership standpoint. Ohio State came into the season probably with the worst storylines that you could have coming into a football season. He was dealing with an interim head coach. Urban Meyer was out. We think about Ohio State's defense and all of this talent that they compiled, and we talked about them possibly being one of the top 4 teams making the playoff. It wasn't even close to that. They lost a game against Purdue. Guess who was the best player? Dwayne Haskins.
Absolutely.
Right. In all of the other games, Dwayne Haskins was the best player for Ohio State. And when you look at a college like that, when you look at a player like that, and you look at the problems that they had for a quarterback to lift them out of that, to have a 13-1 season, to me, says all you need to know about Dwayne Haskins.
Well, look, Dan and I are more on the Kyler Murray train, and you could make the same argument, at least from the standpoint of Kyler Murray being the best player on that Oklahoma team, because he truly was. I think when I look at Kyler Murray and what I like so much about him, a lot of it does have to do with the fit that I think makes a lot of sense with Cliff Kingsbury and that Arizona Cardinals offense. But another thing about him, everyone knocks the size, and I get it. We're talking about that because it would make history to see somebody drafted at his height. But when you look look at the actual numbers, his batted passes rate lower than quarterbacks,
Right.
much taller. Also, he's somebody that had a similar QBR to Andrew Luck coming out of college. So I really do think his game translates.
I mean, he's got the greatest QBR ever.
Right.
2004, since we started tracking it, he beat Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck, two guys that are great players. I would say this when it comes to Kyler Murray and Dwayne Haskins. Kyler Murray, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I can make the exact perfect call. And all 11 guys on defense can do it exactly the way I want, and it still won't matter. That's what Kyler Murray does. He transcends execution. Dwayne Haskins, I love. We had him on the show. He's brilliant. But when Kyler Murray can beat all 11 guys in your defense strictly because of his talent, that's what separates him in comparison to Haskins for me.
I'm told Shefty has more on this and wants to jump back in. Shefty, anytime. Floor is yours.
Well, Greeny, what's interesting here is that there's a split on your set there, right? Two people would pick Haskins, two people would pick Murray. And I think that that's reflective of the way a lot of NFL teams view these quarterbacks and view these cornerbacks and view these wide receivers. There are a lot of split opinions, which is what makes this draft so uncertain and so confusing, because there are people who are in the Kyler Murray camp. It's divided between the old guard and the new guard, old school, new school. There are people who think Dwayne Haskins would be the first quarterback picked in this draft. There are people who say don't want Dwayne Haskins when he started only 13 games in college. There are people who say Kyler Murray, he's played behind the best offensive line in all of football. I can stand back there and throw touchdowns. And so there is a huge divide of opinions on all these guys at all these positions. And I'm telling you that there's a lot of uncertainty going to this draft, and that exists not only on your set, but on draft boards in war rooms across the country right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point for everyone to sort of sit back and take in here, that more than any year I can remember, and this I think is the 23rd draft that I have covered, and the 22nd for ESPN, I feel like we had a much better idea, a much better roadmap at this point in the process of what was going to happen every year than we have right now. I feel like there's a level of uncertainty.
The projection is hard, and let me tell you why. Look at it. Go look at the last 10 years and see what type of quarterbacks won the Super Bowl. Go look at the last 10 years.
But that's the last 10 years.
Easy I think that's easy. I mean, Shefty mentioned it, the old guard versus the new guard. There is a new guard in the NFL, and that new guard, if you're going to take Kyler Murray, it's Cliff Kingsbury. And so you know the offense that is going to make sure his skill set. Here's the thing. There's two parts of this. One, when it comes to Murray or Haskins or even a Lock or whatnot, it's really going to be dependent on what kind of leaders those guys become. You know, everyone relates Kyler Murray to Baker Mayfield. They're not the same guy. They're not the same type of leader. That's going to be more important than really their performance on the field. Can the old guard get caught up with the scheme and also get that leadership? And then the second thing is this. If you're a team that wants to go trade for a guy, go get him. Don't wait. You have to go get him. You'll never regret it.
Now, there's a name we have not yet mentioned here, but it is a name that I think we're going to hear a lot earlier tonight than almost anyone would have imagined even 2 weeks ago, and that's the name Daniel Jones. And for that, Shefty, I want to bring you back into the conversation here, because I think the first real pressure point in the draft tonight is 3 with the Jets. The second is the Giants at 6. Everybody knows it by heart at this point. The Giants have 2 picks in the first round, 6 and 17. The world wants to know if they're going to take a quarterback. Shefty, will the New York Giants come out of tonight, one way or another, with a new quarterback on their roster?
I believe they will, Greeny. I don't know whether that quarterback will be at 6 or whether it will be at 17. There's so much defensive talent in this draft that in a perfect world, my belief is that the Giants would rather go defense at 6 and let the draft come to them at 17. Now, again, we're hearing all this Dwayne Haskins talk, and we don't know exactly where it is and how true it is. I had somebody tell me last night that Drew Lock and Daniel Jones are 1 and 1A on the Giants draft board. We've heard other people say they like Haskins. And so it's hard to decipher the truth. The Giants have done a great job at disguising it, masking it, smoke screening it, whatever you want to call it. We don't know which of the quarterbacks they truly want. The people in that room do. But we can say with certainty that they want to come out of this draft tonight with a quarterback. If they don't, that possibility always exists that maybe going into day 2 of the draft, that they could look to trade a draft pick at that point for Josh Rosen. But Josh Rosen would be the backup plan here. The primary plan is to go get one of these quarterbacks in the first round of the draft. We just don't know whether it will be at 6 or 17. My gut is it's 17 before it's 6, or maybe even coming up from 17 to get back into the top 10 after they pick a defensive player at 6.
Here's the thing, and Shefty we've heard Gettleman say it many times. He's going to let it come to him. But here's the problem you have if you're him. If I'm Dave Gettleman and someone moves up to the 3 spot for the Jets to take Dwayne Haskins, then you have to take the quarterback you want at 6, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because that guy's going to be gone.
You look at the moves the Giants made, right? They signed Sterling Shepard to a deal. They brought in Golden Tate. You're going to get Evan Ingram back at that position. And Eli Manning is in his twilight years. Like, I don't even understand why we're having a conversation about the Giants possibly not taking a quarterback. They need to go get their guy at 6. It's a lot of defensive players in this draft that you can get at 17 that'll be very effective players. It makes no sense to me for the Giants to think they need to go defense at 6 and then 17 at quarterback.
And the name Drew Lock, you cover the SEC for us every single week, Laura Rutledge. This is a name that during the season no one spoke at all. And all of a sudden, people have him the #1 quarterback on their board. What happened? How did that happen?
He has the most NFL-ready arm right now, and I think that's what people look at and say this guy has accuracy. He also, I think, brings a lot of moxie to the table. Not a lot of people know who he is as a player and who he is as a person. He dealt with a ton of adversity at Missouri, went through coaching changes, dealt with all kinds of issues there, and went through it and led his team, I believe, to a really good season, considering what they had. But I think that's what it actually is it's more just looking at his arm. And right now, I would say, if you take Daniel Jones ahead of Drew Lock, that's a mistake. I would still say that Dwayne Haskins is QB2, but for me, Drew Lock's QB3 in this draft.
Put them in order. There's 4 guys. They're going to be the first 4. Although there are some people who believe, I've heard people say, I would talk about it with McShay yesterday, there are other quarterbacks who are projected behind Daniel Jones that they like better than him.
Yeah.
Ryan Finley
Jarrett
and Jarrett Stidham.
Will Greer.
But put those 4 guys in order for you right now. The 4 guys we expect to be the first 4 off the board. What's your order?
It's Kyler and Haskins. And then there's a relatively solid drop-off for me, and it's Drew Lock and Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Here's where I stand. I've liked Drew Lock to the Giants for a while just because Pat Shurmur has said my quarterback needs to move a little bit. But let me make this point about Daniel Jones, because this is where teams in the NFL sometimes get themselves in problems. Daniel Jones never really dominated at Duke. He never really dominated in college football. He struggled when they played against Clemson, all right? A very talented football team, especially defensively. You watch Daniel Jones struggle mightily against Clemson. That's an issue for me of going, wait, why was there so much struggle against the team that is probably, at least talent-wise, closest to an NFL roster, right? There's talent 11 deep on that team. Why were there so many struggles? Why couldn't we get completions? Why were there so many misses? I have issues with that. I go, wait, why? If you're going to be the guy that I expect you to come into my organization and totally take us to a next level, how come I didn't see it in college football? You were never dominant in college football. If you weren't dominant in college football, how can I expect you to dominate in the NFL?
And by the way, if Daniel Jones goes in the top 10, Dan Orlovsky's going to freak out tomorrow on Get Up, so tune in for that. But one thing that I do think that was interesting that Shefty mentioned earlier is the fact that next year's quarterback draft class is better than this one's, most likely. And there are a lot of teams who could end up taking quarterbacks.
Dangerous, though.
Well, right, but there are a lot of teams that are going to take quarterbacks this year that may not be of the caliber of next year's
And I would say this, do the Jets regret what they did last year?
Certainly not.
No.
Do the Bills regret what they did and go getting Josh Allen?
Nope.
No. Do the Texans regret going to get Deshaun Watson? If your organization pegs a guy, if your organization goes, that's our guy for the next 10 years, we might not agree with it, but you go get him. But you better have either production or projection to justify that move.
Well, the new CBA created an outlet for him. And that's where you got front offices that are more comfortable possibly reaching for a guy because you don't have to pay him $60 million the day he signs a contract. So there are a lot of things that probably will play to see if you can develop a guy because you don't have to bet the house on the fact that he'll be your franchise quarterback.
Listen, you just named all those teams that made those moves. You know what? Not one of them did. They didn't let the draft come to them.
They went and got
the
it.
decision they wanted. They went out and got their guy. That's what tonight is about. Shefty, stay with us all morning long. I know that as any news comes along, Adam Schefter will bring it to you right here on Get Up. And that's not all we have coming your way. As we